In this video, we'll be doing the Easter eggs and prediction for Season 6, Episode 6 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Super War. Spoiler, not caught up. So the beginning of the episode is in this like white room where they're trying. Fitz and Simmons are trying to catch up, and Fitz mentions that Simmons was 100 years in the future, if you could believe that, because Fitz doesn't actually know that this Simmons came back to the past, and all that whole stuff is all figured out. So it's nice to see that. But Otaro comes in, catches Fitzsimmons up of what they have to do, and we know this already since the last episode. But they want Fitz to figure out how to time travel to go to the past so they could save Chronica 2. And they study the monolith or whatever and whatnot, but it starts slowly detouring into other things of catching up. But before that, you see that Fitz decides to propose to Simmons right away so he can get it out of the way, and it's basically the same proposal that he did in Season 5, Episode 6, about talking about the bottom of the Atlantic and whatnot. And this is technically the third proposal for them, since Simmons didn't hear Fitz the first time, and then Simmons decided to propose to Fitz later on in that episode. But he references they crossed the galaxies more than once, which is most likely referencing Season 3, and then this season, Season 6. But it could technically be also a reference to Season 5, because Fitz had to have crossed galaxies to get from Chronica 2, Cygnus star or whatever, to the lighthouse on Earth. So even though he had no knowledge of that, it's technically a reference to that as well. When they're catching up, Fitz asks Simmons, "Did you run into any Kree?" which is referring to this last year of Avengers, and she says, "Not recently," which is referring to when she was a slave in 2091 in last season. So yeah, and when Simmons turns into a little girl, Fitz has this scream that sounds very similar to a monkey, which I'm assuming it was intentional because Fitz likes monkeys, and there are a ton of different references throughout this episode for monkeys. So yeah, and you see how Fitz is dealing with this and getting really mad, and you basically see the same side of Fitz that he has with Robin. So I don't know what is the issue with kids, but he mentions that you'll only have 2 PhDs by the time you're 17, which we knew that she had at least two PhDs, and the only way that Fitz could get Simmons back was to basically anger her by referencing the fact that he would want Ada's help to figure out how to get out of this mind prison and figure out time travel and whatnot. So yeah, but she gets mad, she returns, whatever. But there are other references to this episode that could be references or Easter eggs or whatever, but I don't know 100%, because when Fitz and Simmons are talking about their adventures, they mention this planet called Saldon. I can't find anything related to that, but there is another reference, another thing that they say is Carthan, which there is a character in the comics called Simon's Carthan, which is a cyborg, but I don't know if that was a reference to him or it was just a random name that they wanted to say. But yeah, and near the end of the episode, just the way I took it is that it looks like Fitz and Simmons from here on out, they're just going to be married, and they're not going to actually have a second second wedding, because Simmons is trying to talk to him or whatever about what he's been dealing with, or what he's just witnessed about his death or whatever. But I'll get to that later a bit. But she says, "I can't give you your time you missed, but I can give you me," and then she hands his wedding ring to him. So it just seems like they might just be married from here on out, even though people might not appreciate that, but I would, because I don't really care about couples. So yeah, but near the end, basically the end of the episode, Tara comes in and she says, this was 5 minutes and 33 seconds wasted, which even though it was 45 minutes for the actual audience, but this could be a way for them to have not acknowledged it, even though to me it doesn't feel like it is that a lot of people felt this episode, since it was focusing on Fitzsimmons and a mind prison, and apparently doesn't advance the storyline, even though it does in a way. They're calling it a filler episode, which it really isn't, because this episode has been dealing with everything we've been seeing for the past 5 episodes, including this. So it's not a filler episode; it's still continuing these episodes. But you could agree with Tara if you do feel that way, if you feel it's a filler episode. And speaking of Atara and the Chromicons, when Enoch finally gets into action or whatever, we see that we see Atara basically make a sound and fall over or whatever, and it's the same thing that the Chronicons did in season 3 or in episode 3. Making him a decommissioned Chromicon. So I'm assuming they're not dead, because that would be kind of a weird way to have killed them. But so I'm assuming at some point we will see them again. Because it just seems kind of weird that they would have done that. Going to the Simmons storyline, or Simmons room, is we see a stuffed monkey, a Winnie the Pooh doll, Paddington Bear's doll. They talk about, Simmons wants Fitz to read him a bedtime story, or her bedtime story, about a prince lost in space, which is basically the adventures of Fitz and Simmons this season, where and we see a little robot who is apparently Fitz's imaginary friend, who's Enoch, and we see Daisy, who is a bunny in this story apparently. But then one of the characters people are confused about is the bear, which I personally understand why, because I can't figure out where this outfit is from, but he's wearing this like yellow and black outfit, and but I've never seen anyone wear that ever, so I don't know exactly who it's supposed to be. But my first thought was it was Mac, because Daisy referred to Mac in season 3 episode 1 as a teddy bear, so having Mac as a teddy bear would make, or be a bear in this storyline or story or whatever, would make sense. And then later on in the or just after Fitz closes the book, it turns into the Darkhold. And one big thing that caught me off guard in this sequence or whatever is that Simmons' room, even in like the last room when they were drinking tea, is that it was covered in butterflies. So I'm not sure if the writers are trying to tell us that somehow Simmons has a connection to Snowflake in a way, because she deals with deals with butterflies, about I'll turn you into a butterfly or not, whatnot, but I don't know. And later on in the episode they go back to the room, and this time the music box that Simmons hides all her fears in starts opening, and what comes out is a zombie Simmons, which is it's most likely referenced again later on in the episode. But this Simmons is dressed head to toe in 2 outfits from Simmons' past, which one was a slave outfit from season 5 when Cassius got a hold of her, so she has the gold forehead and like the sleeves or whatever, and the dress, I guess, as the slave. But then she also, on top of that, you see what she wore in Mavis in season 3, episode 5, but also at the end of season 2. So, yeah, but that right there shows that Simmons has been hiding stuff for a long, long time, and it goes into her character, even though people say it's an inconsistency and this zombie Simmons has come out of nowhere. But when Simmons came back from Mavis, she's doing a therapy session with Andrew, and she's trying to avoid talking to him, saying that she's fine, she doesn't have PTSD, so she's trying not to think about it. So this music box really hasn't come out of nowhere. It's just we'd never actually heard of it until now, if that makes sense. And it shows that Simmons, when she was trapped in the closet with Fitz, when she says it's been a rough year, that outfit says a lot otherwise, that she's been dealing with this for years. So yeah, the next thing, they're back, like we're seeing the Chronicon ship for a few scenes or whatever, and Enoch's talking to Atara, and he uses the same phrase that Fitz said to him last episode, which is, "You are being the total absolutely worse." So he's just using the words against or towards Atara this time. And then at the end of the episode, when they escape the Chronicon ship, Simmons does it at the very last moment and mentions that Fitz is a grandfather. So I wonder what the relationship. I want to see what the dynamics going to be this season, because it could be different. So like I said previous, is that I don't feel that the Chronicons are gone that easily, so they will probably come back and somehow connect to the storyline that's happening on Earth, since Mac says later on in the episode is that we saw the homeworld, it was destroyed or whatever by these alien bats, so there's a much bigger storyline going on. I just don't exactly know how it's going to connect, so that's just a prediction there, and that's where I'm going to leave off part 1. I know that I've been doing a lot of part 1s lately, but there's just a lot of Easter eggs or references for this episode, so yeah. Come back for part 2, which I'll finish up. I'll start with the lighthouse and whatnot, so there. See ya.